Well, hello, and welcome to this episode of the Leadership in Aviation podcast. I met the most fascinating person on a town hall that we did for the Women in Aviation Advisory Board a couple of months ago and was just enthralled by Ryan Goertzen's story and invited him to come back on the podcast and talk about it a little bit more in depth. Give us some tidbits from his leadership style that makes all of this possible. And I am thrilled to have Ryan Goertzen, the VP of Maintenance Workforce Development at AAR Corp, here with me today. Ryan, welcome.
Oh, Renee, thank you so very much for allowing me to come back. Actually, this is just a really neat opportunity for me, and really hope that your viewers will find our dialogue today helpful as we look at just the state of the industry that we're in today and our inability to find people and all that stuff. So really happy to be here.
Well, one of the things that struck me about you immediately is your generous attitude and kind of your no nonsense, we're going to find a solution to the problem that we have kind of attitude. And one of the major ways that you're doing that is reaching into communities that would never be exposed to aviation, men and women who may not even ever fly on an airplane, and pull them into a great career in aviation. Will you talk about what you're doing on the south side of Chicago?
Oh, God, what an initiative. I'm so proud of the deliberate work. And I say deliberate because that's what you have to be. You have to be deliberate and you have to be intentional at getting the outcome that you desire. And we know, unfortunately in aviation, if you don't kind of look like me, you're in the vast minority. And that includes women. It includes, people of color, all people of color. And for us, this initiative in South Chicago really started with our CEO, John Holmes, sitting down with the mayor at the time, Rahm Emanuel, in 2018, and really saying, listen, AAR, we see a workforce crisis in 2018 on the horizon. The mayor said, we got to do something in South Chicago. And it just kind of one thing led to another. And in 4 months after that initial conversation, 4 months later, we stood up an aviation sheet metal program in South Chicago with Olive Harvey College as our partner. And we're now in our 8th cohort of students. We're getting ready to start another sheet metal class probably in October, which will bring us to 9 cohorts, which is exciting. But one of the things we saw is that we couldn't stop just there, right? We needed to really, how do we bring this earlier on into the pipeline? And so we again partnered with Olive Harvey. We created an aviation high school program focused on the junior and senior year of high school. And we did that in partnership with the largest aviation school in the country, the Aviation Institute of Maintenance. And they partnered with Olive Harvey College on the associate's degree side. And then I partnered, got us all together on the bachelor's side with Southern Illinois University. So we've now created not just a short sheet metal program, we've also created a high school pathwaying program to a certificate, an FA certificate, an associate's degree, all the way to a bachelor's degree. We've brought partnerships of industry with public partnerships, private partnerships, universities, community colleges. And we think we've created kind of a model, or maybe the model, that could be replicated all over the United States to really help us on this workforce crisis that we're experiencing today in aviation.
I absolutely love that. I like how you took it from one little kernel and you've expanded it more and more and more. It's never going to be big enough, it seems like, in your mind. But one of the cool things about this is that you had real results pretty immediately. So if I'm a young man or woman who is impacted by this program, what are those real results? What did that mean for me if I was in that first cohort? What are those young people doing in aviation now?
Yeah, I think of David Sanchez. He was our first hire out of the program. He was in cohort number 1. Instead of going to Rockford, he actually moved to Indianapolis, where we have a facility as well. And, for him, it was all about, you created a pathway, right? I didn't know, nobody in my family's been in aviation. In a lot of cases, I'm the first person to ever be in aviation. I might even be the first one to ever go to a college kind of program. And so, again, going to that intentional and deliberate, impact, what it meant is these men and women got put on a career path. And I like to talk about aviation in the sense of career, not this is a job, right? Because I think, not that I hate McDonald's, I love McDonald's, but that's kind of an introductory job. Yeah, you could become a manager, but it's not the same as this 6-figure career path. And so I like to talk in that sense. I like and part of AAR's Eagle Career Pathway was that very thing, and is to really make sure that people really understood, what does it mean to be an aviation maintenance technician, and what does the career path, what does the natural progression look like? And when we built Eagle, just like we did with our other programs, like our sheet metal program, it was all about understanding, what does your future look like 5 years from now? What does it look like 10 years from now? What do you need to do right now that's going to prepare you for that next job or next job inside of this career, from a technician to a lead, to a supervisor, to a project manager? We really wanted from day one to really focus in on that for these students at Olive Harvey, because a lot of what we did was, it wasn't just the technical side we were trying to do, it was all the education around the career that we were also embedding in this curriculum. So that's what we provided to these students. And we're very excited to the work that we've done, around helping them navigate this career path inside of AAR, or wherever they would choose, quite frankly.
Yeah, I think that's really beneficial. I was struck when you and I first talked about this, with the amount of time from when someone joins the program to when they actually have enough skills to have a job, to be producing some income in this career field, just to get their foot in the door and actually be making real money. Will you talk a little bit about that? Because it's not an 18-month process.
You're exactly right. And again, when we thought about which program should we start, this aviation sheet metal program became kind of the idea, because in the case of South Chicago, most of these men and women are working already, right? So they're having to manage maybe a family, they're having to manage, work. They're recognizing that they're underemployed, so they're trying to do something about it. So we knew that the longer you make it, the harder it is for these folks that are trying to make the transition into a career that has a future. And so in just 60 days, so we built it, it's a 300 clock hour program. And in just 60 days, they have the introductory skill sets required to go into a repair station or repair and overhaul facility like an AAR, and be able to do that aviation sheet metal kind of work. But one of the things we did is we really focused also on, let's try to find other hiring partners, because it's not just AAR, right, that needs people. Everybody needs people, it seems like. And if we can ensure that they find a job, right, we don't just want to educate you, we want you in the job market. That is exactly what we went out to do. So there are other hiring partners, including the metro system of Illinois, because guess what? They need sheet metal workers on those rail cars as well. So it's very transferable from that perspective.
I love this so much. So I want to get a little bit away from the program, which I think is outstanding, and talk about where we're in part of that. So what about your background led you to this point where you could envision this and then expand it again? I want to hear about the brilliance behind this program and what your background is, Ryan.
Well, I'll tell you what, I just moved into my family farmhouse in Nebraska. I've actually gone full circle now for some reason. I moved back here. I have a son that's really thinking about taking up the family farm. And so it's very interesting though, but a quarter mile from my house is an ag strip where they did a lot of agricultural flying during the summer. And I saw airplanes take off. So my entire life, I saw airplanes. I didn't really understand anything about aviation because my dad was a farmer and his parents were farmers and his great grandparents were farmers. So I really had nobody in aviation to really help me. And so it kind of lands. I'm going to tell you a little short story. When I go into my Olive Harvey classes in South Chicago, about 99%, 95, sometimes it's 100% of the classes are people of color. And one of the things I tell them, day one is I say, you're not different than I am. And, a lot of them will look at me and go, well, what do you mean? You don't look like me and you're not in, how can that be? And I said, well, let me tell you something. In your family, has there ever been anybody in aviation? No. And I said, you know what? In my family, there's never been anybody in aviation. And I said, how did you get to aviation? Well, you stepped almost like a step of faith, right? You heard about the program, you decided down this pathway. And for me, it was very much like that. Though I started out, growing up on a farm, I really wanted to be in aviation. I surrounded myself with just becoming knowledgeable about aviation. But it wasn't until I got through, really into my first aviation job, which was, believe it or not, Renee, a pilot job. So I actually was a pilot instructor for Air Wisconsin Airlines Corporation. I moved from Nebraska in the middle of nowhere to Appleton, Wisconsin. I really didn't know. I'd never been to Wisconsin. And I also tell most people about that. Just take the first job, right? Just take it, right? Because you'll be surprised where that job, will take you. And for me, Renee, it's really from the pilot side to the maintenance side to moving to Oklahoma City, where I worked in the big maintenance repair and overhaul center in Oklahoma City. I became a college president of all things, which I know we'll probably talk about a little bit, but I never would have thought my pathway would have taken that journey. And, for me, that's a little bit of why today I think I have a lot of success, is because I've been a pilot. I've been a director of training at an MRO. I've been a college president, and now I'm in workforce. And so it's all about, surrounding yourself, listening, with good people. And I think what you got to do is I say to my Olive Harvey folks, just take the first job. It worked out for me. And I think the difference now is you have me as an advocate helping you navigate this career path, which I never had. I wish somebody could have taught me or come alongside me as a student and early on in my journey in aviation, because I think I might have even done even more cool things maybe. So.
Well, I think that aspect of having a mentor, having someone come alongside of you is incredibly important. And one of the important things about that is that it's there that you learn some of the soft skills and receive some of the informal professional development that's very important to advocating for yourself, to asking for a bigger job, to taking some risks or taking on some challenges that you wouldn't have done if you hadn't had someone in your corner. Can you talk a little bit about, if I'm new in the industry, what I should be looking for in in a relationship like that, where that person's going to challenge me to rise to the next level? Because it sounds like you've done a lot of that from both sides in your career. And I'd love to hear what wisdom you have for mentors or mentees.
I'm gonna, this one might be an elongated answer, but for me, somebody that had very big influence from day one was a gal by the name of Becky Ludy, who I think you might know. And she was my college professor. And what having kind of grown up in a very sheltered environment, I didn't know a lot of people of color. I sure didn't know any aviation women, right? And so when I got to my first class, and Becky really pushed that in me. I mean, I remember that class like it's yesterday. Introduction to Aviation was what it was. And, what she has done, having continued to work with her throughout my career, I think is an example of, it can start very, very early, even before you even start your career, while you're in college, getting prepared for that career, is one thing. And then I think, when I graduated from college, I went to work for Air Wisconsin, in which everybody I worked with could be my dad, like literally everyone I worked with. And so I was like the young kid, almost like their son working in the organization, right? In which I had a lot of great mentors of people that had been 25 plus years at the airline, and almost 40 years in the industry in some cases, right? And those were the people I worked with on a daily basis. And so I really gleaned, I think a lot of times, sometimes they were mentors, but a lot of times they gave advice, right? And they gave the history, and they gave you this understanding. And so, I think that that's an example where, as you just kind of, some of them are, you can learn a lot just by listening and being involved with people who have been around for a long time. And are you listening, right? I think that's another thing is, do you use those opportunities to help kind of put nuggets of information that you may or may not use, but you may, right? You're more than likely going to. And so, I've been really fortunate about, kind of making that transition. They kind of watched and cared for me a little bit, right? Because I was so young in comparison to them. But, I think one of the other people I would say, when I left Air Wisconsin after being on the pilot side, maintenance side, and then I went to AAR in Oklahoma City for the first time. And I worked very closely with a guy by the name of Noel Christian, who really invested the time, right? And really, not only did we do our one-on-one meetings, but really was willing to take the time. And I think that's something that's missing today, in society, is everybody is so darn busy, and nobody, okay, let's just get this thing done, right? Let's just quickly do our thing and then let's move on. You need to look for people who truly care and have a vision for helping you in your career growth. And, it was hard. Of all the people I left, I cried in his office when I left AAR. I was going from a manager of training to a vice president job at a college. And I remember, because he was a guy that took the time to invest. And I think, as I think about the people listening, they're out there. Find those people, latch on to them, because they will put you down and give you the guidance you need down your career path, for success. So
I think that's so valuable, Ryan. And one thing that I wrote down in my notes, just to remember as I go after this podcast, just to remember and think about, is that mentors are all around you. And I really, really see this on the pilot side, that young pilots take the approach of, I can learn something from every other pilot that's out there, and I can learn something new on every flight that I take. Yep. So I think that one thing that as a younger person in the industry, you could take away from this. I'm a young pilot, so even if I'm not a young person, but one of the things is always be looking for an opportunity to learn something from someone around you, and you'll find that you have more mentors than you ever thought that you had. And then on the flip side of that, as a person who has some experience, life experience or job experience, flying experience, always be looking for those people who are hungry for something bigger, for something more, and invest in those people. I know sometimes it's as discouraging as a mentor because we don't see people around us who are hungry, or we get paired up with someone who really isn't that interested in learning from us. So I think just gravitating toward the people who really want to learn and want to grow, and from a younger person's standpoint, who is it that I can learn from, and just being around them, and even writing down the nuggets that you can take from them, just like I took that one from you, is really important. And reflecting on those later can be really life-changing. It sounds like for you as well as me.
Yes, you got to write your goals down, right? Or those nuggets of information, because you'll forget. I mean, life is too busy. You meet way too many. There's all this stuff going on. But I always, one of my favorite quotes, and it's a little bit interesting, but Ray Lewis did I do a lot of Ray Lewis quotes, but he says, if you're not pissed off for greatness, you're okay for being mediocre. And he did this to the Stanford basketball team. It was about a 1.5-minute video. It's a really, really powerful 1.5 minutes. And I think that when you look at your career, and as you start your career, especially as you talk, Renee, about young folks, whether they're men or women, right? It's being willing to learn, continue that, right? You hear that a good pilot is always learning, and all that good stuff you learn in school. That is so very, very true. Making yourself willing to learn, right? And keeping yourself around people who want to invest. But I really am a big person on, goals, and laying down, where do you see yourself 2 years from now? Where do you see yourself, 5 years from now? And what are the things that you need to do yourself, first of all, but then who do you need to come alongside as you're going down that, down that journey, right? And because I really think that, one of the approaches I took, at the airline was, at some point, the job, I'm going to get everything out of this job that the job could possibly provide me. And once that's done, you need to look at what's the next thing that's going to challenge me. And for me, when I was at Air Wisconsin, I spent a lot of time with the flight guys, whether it was the domicile managers, or whether it was, the chief pilots of the specific aircraft type, because at the time we had 3 different aircraft types at Air Wisconsin. Each one of them brought about a different methodology of leadership. And I got to see those different methodologies firsthand where I was in the training department. And it came to the point where, it was time to get out of the pilot side and into aviation maintenance. One, I lost my medical, so I couldn't fly anymore. So I wanted to stay in aviation. So, when adversity comes your way, which is going to come, right? All of us have had adversity, right? One way or the other, whether it's a medical in my case, that I lost, or somebody passes away, or whatever, right? It's how you respond to that adversity that's most important. And for me, it was just a shift into, I had one conversation with the vice president of flight operations about an opening for the maintenance training manager. And he said, well, do you want it? And I said, yeah. Next day I had the job, right? That quickly.
I love that. I love you being open to exploring new things and turning something that could have left you bitter and disappointed into something that actually ended up being an important part of your career path. And you said a lot about learning on your own, but there's also some importance in learning corporately. And I think that it's one of the big projects that AAR takes on that I don't see a lot of other companies in the industry doing, and that is providing some professional development that's not just technical training. Will you talk about the importance of providing that leadership development as a formal part of a job?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, I remember this, 2018, when I got on with AAR, October of that year, I remember sitting with the GM in Indianapolis at the time, and he's like, listen, we know our biggest struggle is really around our frontline leadership, because people don't leave often for money. They leave because they don't like the leader that they're working with. And in our case, it's different. I don't want to say maintenance is harder than being a pilot, but I think in all cases, who you work with or who you have to go to show up to work with every day, and you got to work with this person all the time. What are we doing? Just because you're a great mechanic doesn't mean you're going to be a great leader, right? And that's one of the things we often made some wrong decisions, right? We took these great technicians and said, hey, you're going to be a lead. And all of a sudden we have 20% attrition on that particular shift because of wait a minute, he's not the leader. Or maybe he is, or she is, but we haven't invested in them. And so when I look at, the investment that AAR has made, there was never a workforce development VP like me. There was never a director of talent development within the organization. We hired a new VP of HR. We hired 2 MRO, maintenance, repair, and engineer overhaul, maintenance, repair, and overhaul, very specific trainers, leadership trainers. So they weren't corporate folks. We embedded them within the MRO, and we said, we need to develop 2 courses. And they kind of went to work on what we call Leadership 101 and Leadership 102. And then we've now subsequently, we have those 2 courses, and now we have a DEI course, which is, I gotta say, is just, it's a very powerful training class as well. And really, really opening people's minds and understanding what's going on really out there in a way that's all, you get the politics out of the way and you get to the core, right, of what is DEI and what do you want people to really understand about it. And so we kind of have these 3 courses all geared to the leadership of AAR, and really not necessarily executive leadership. That's a different group. But down at the heart and soul of our organization is our maintenance, repair, and overhaul facilities. We have 3,000 people in that area, right, of our company. And so it's down right to your first leadership role, right? A lead technician, and then a supervisor, and then a project manager, program manager, director of maintenance, et cetera. So tremendous investment. And we've been doing that since really 2019. And we stayed, I think one of the reasons I think we're a little bit more where we are today is that even when COVID happened, we didn't stop. None of these initiatives ground to a halt, right? We kept yes, we curtailed it. Yes, we made it smaller, but we kept it going. And I think that's the key, because the people were still there, right? Yeah, we had to lay off some people, but we brought them all back 9 months later very quickly. And so we knew we needed to do this, and we stayed true to what AAR's mission was on our frontline leadership.
So do you think that creates a different environment of loyalty, of productivity, of efficiency, of safety, and of employee satisfaction? I think the answer is yes, right? But yes, with maybe a caveat, right? When you invest in the kind of investment of our people that we have, we're also very attractive to lots of other organizations along the natural career progression, i.e. the airlines. And so we've become very close with our airline partners, though, because the workforce is tightened so much that if all of our folks go to them, that doesn't necessarily do them any good either, because then we have this gaping hole in the maintenance organization that doesn't work
very well either. So I think that the answer is, of clearly, yes, it's clearly the investment that we make in people makes a huge difference. Knowing that they have a voice, knowing that they're part of, most of the decision-making processes, I think plays a role. Because, what I love about AAR is that it's kind of entrepreneurial in nature. Even though it's a pretty big, it's a pretty big company, right? Each individual station, so Oklahoma City or Rockford or Indy or Miami, it's its own business, right? So you take this 5,000 employees and you drop it down to 400 in Oklahoma City or about 400 in Rockford, right? So everybody plays an important role and they understand what that role is. And I think that if you look at our attrition, we naturally have attrition. We're a company, you're never going to get to no attrition in a company like us because we are the natural stepping stone to a different part of your career. And so I think we embrace that as a company and we understand that as is going to happen, but that does not stop us from not investing in our people, right? We have to, because as we all know, you might be one of our next leaders. You might leave and come back. That happens all the time, by the way.
Or you might leave and go to an airline and be incredibly loyal to keeping AAR as a partner to the airline. So you're fostering loyalty, whether it's as an employee or as a potential partner in the future. I think that loyalty is incredibly important.
It is.
Ryan, if you were gonna give advice, like 2 or 3 pieces of advice to people who are in a leadership position in aviation about what corporately as an entire industry we need to be focusing on to develop leaders to really sustain this industry in a meaningful way from a leadership perspective, what would those couple of nuggets be that someone could begin to work on today?
Well, I think for me, it's always been an investment of your time, right? So be willing to take the time, right? If you're a leader and you have folks underneath you, you need to take the time. You need to be like Noel was with me, and take the time. And sometimes those days were, man, it almost felt like you wasted your hour, right? And other days you were like, oh my goodness, I'm seeing the fruits of that conversation. So I think as a leader, you need to be willing to invest the time, right? And I think the other part of that is, as a leader, you also have to be making the hard decisions, right? And I think those are things, and especially hard decisions around personnel, because people are watching. Your folks that are, your high performing folks don't want to be working with people who aren't high performing, right? And that's, I think, part of the issue, because I've seen some folks not. They're maybe good on one end, but not on the other. And that other end is what's really causing their kind of organization to not function the way it's supposed to. You gotta do that. If it's not the right fit, it may not mean fire the person. It may mean get them into a different role, right? That's more in line with that skill set. And I think a lot of people wait. And by the way, I'm one of those that waited too long sometimes. I didn't make the right decisions, right, with personnel quickly enough, and it caused some challenges and some issues, along the way. And then I think, I think along that path it's not good enough to just set goals at the beginning of the quarter or beginning of the fiscal year and then not look at them, right? It's got to be, your biweekly or monthly or weekly checkups, whatever the pace is of the organization, I think is really big. And then I've always been a reader. I like reading, not just leadership books, but I like to read just historical books, right? And of history and leaders and, those kinds of folks, and I think that's always, I think having a little bit of a hobby of reading outside of work, or while you're on an airplane is I think also a healthy is also healthy for somebody to strive to grow their career beyond where they are.
So just to summarize that, first thing is to invest in your people. The second thing is to make decisions, because people are watching you, and your indecisiveness can cause some mixed messages. And then the third is, don't just invest in other people, but invest in yourself and have an attitude of learning. I love all three of those things, taking those to heart. I do some of those, but it's definitely good to have a refresher on that. And if you're listening to this podcast today, I really hope that you have those takeaways as well. Ryan, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. I love the peek inside of AAR and how things are working well there, what you're doing for the communities that you're a part of, and how others might be able to do that in a public, private, and educational partnership as well. It's just very inspirational to me.
I got to say, Renee, I really, really appreciate it. This is the second one we've been able to be on together, and it's been a real honor, and the work that we're doing to make a difference in the aviation and aerospace community. I always think it's funny. I look down at the time and I'm like, boom, 45 minutes gone, just like that. So I guess we had a good. I really, I had a great time, and look forward to future endeavors.
Absolutely. Well, for those of you who are listening, if you enjoyed this podcast, please share it with others. Please give us a review or rating. Subscribe to the podcast, because we'll have more and more guests who are doing great things in aviation, like Ryan. You can follow me on socials at René Banglesdorf is my handle on most social media channels. And you can reach out to Ryan. I'll drop his LinkedIn profile in the show notes for this show. And I really appreciate you tuning in to Leadership in Aviation.